We're very happy to have with us Noel Sagerman today. Noel is an extraordinary jazz drummer based in New Jersey, the New York area as well. Noel has played all the great clubs in the city. He's gotten a chance to tour to so many places. Among some of the names he's gotten a chance to work with Dave Stryker, Pharoah Sanders, Bruce Williams, John Patton. And Noel, good to see you. Thanks for coming on today for Take Two.
Good to see you too, Abe. Thanks for having me.
Good, good. So we got cut off, but this is going to be an entirely, we'll try to keep some of the same themes. But the first thing I asked you was that you've gotten to work with so many great people, and what's been the most helpful thing in terms of your development working with any particular person over the years?
Yeah, so like I said, Bruce Williams and I had an ongoing relationship since '93. Started jamming together. Met him at the Peppermint Lounge jam session at a time when he had he had an accident and was not in school at the moment. He hadn't finished William Patterson yet, so I had just moved back to the area, so we were both kind of in a similar place of having some time to jam. So we would jam a lot. I lived somewhere where we could have a lot of sessions, and we played a lot of duo sessions too, and established a really great connection, and was fortunate to play with him quite a bit over the years.
So would you say he's your favorite person to work with when you get the gig with him? You're super excited about it.
Most definitely, I'm not gonna say something like most favorite, right? But most significant over the course of my life, easily the most significant, you know.
And I know you've gotten a chance to play with him for 30 years. So how does it, in terms of, comfort being with someone on the bandstand that you've gotten a chance to work with so many times? I would imagine you guys don't need to say too much, and you sometimes can just start playing, or he can start playing, and you can just go from there.
Absolutely, we always had a pretty natural connection and spent a lot of time playing together. But when I was younger, I was a little, like in maybe a little emboldened by my ignorance. So over the years, as we strive to get better and maybe are checking our own playing and selves out. So I would say that I'm still, when I play with Bruce, I'm still really striving to reach the level that I know he expects and that he's on, and then he gets from a lot of the other musicians he calls.
Yeah, that's, to me, I've always looked at, you know, you're a success in jazz if you're able to play this music and get paid under, whatever circumstances that there are. These days with social media, everyone has their own definition of success in terms of, oh, if I'm successful, if I have 1,000 followers or 20,000 streams, or I played at this venue, or I toured with this person, or I have a record deal. You're someone who works quite a bit. You're such an in demand drummer. What do you think it is? What would you define as success as for you, November 14th, 2024?
I guess I feel very lucky that I've never really thought that way. I don't know why that I don't, and some people do, but I just do this because this is what I want to do. I don't have, I didn't come into it with a goal of what success would mean, and I just feel very lucky that I'm still able to keep trying. That's all.
So, your approach is, I'm successful. I'm just doing what I love, and that's the most important thing.
I don't know that I'm successful. I'm just feel lucky that I'm doing what I love and I'm still here. That's it. I don't like you said, everybody has a different definition of success, but
Yeah, and
I
I know
guess that's
you.
never been a focal point for me is succeeding.
Yeah, no, that's interesting to hear, and and I'm also kind of curious too because you came from the great state of Vermont, I know. That's where. What
I'm
was it
originally
like
from New
making it?
Jersey.
What?
I'm originally from New Jersey.
Originally from Jersey, but then
Yeah,
went
my
up there
family
for.
moved to Vermont. I finished school up there, and that's when I started getting into jazz and playing drums more seriously. But I'm from West Orange, New Jersey originally, and started playing, elementary school band, and it was just kind of a hobby. Then when I was at school, University of Vermont, started playing with friends and doing gigs, and that's when it started to become more focal point for me.
Did you know you were going to come back right away after finishing school?
No, not at first. I was just happy to be playing, and Burlington, Vermont at that time was a very lucky place to start because there was gigs, even though I just was a beginner. I was working, and my good friend Brian Camilio is the one who inspired me to realize that moving to New York or the New York area would be the best scenario for us if we were really gonna be able to um, learn about this music. Not because there weren't great players there, but the guys that were great players there lived somewhere else and then moved there.
I
There
got
was
it.
there was a cat, Dave Grippo from Long Island and Bruce Sklar from Boston and Jeff Salisbury, all these great musicians that were up there. Jeff, one of my teachers, he played with Albert King. There was great musicians in town, but they didn't get to it there.
Right. And I know you
So
also sometimes, we were talking before about how you really think about the word just groove when you play. That's one of that's the word that you said. I wanted to ask you too because there seems to be a moment or so in our lives where it's like we're going down that we're going to be a musician or we're going to go down the jazz direction. Do you remember when it was where you're kind of like, okay, this is where I'm going now? Or what was it that was the reason to what inspired you to go that way?
I think I said earlier that playing drums was just a hobby for me. So I'm in college, still playing drums as a hobby, would get together with friends and play some covers. And one of those friends was already a fairly accomplished jazz guitar player, as well as just having fun and jamming with us. So he had a duo with, I mentioned Brian Camilio before. So this friend's the first guy I've just mentioned, John Kerner. We lived in the same house, and then we would jam pretty often. But John was friends with Brian already, and they had some duo gigs. And they asked me to play a jazz gig with them and make it a trio. I'd never played jazz in my life or thought about it, and I literally asked them, "What should I bring?" And then so just playing with them, and Brian was already really good at hustling gigs, so we're working pretty steadily. A new club opened up. We were working 4 nights a week. Just a few months after that first gig, where I'd never played jazz before, I'm playing Wednesday through Saturday with these guys. That it would be me, the two of them, and we'd hire horn players. We'd make it a full
So,
band.
typically people can learn jazz off the records or by going to music school or by taking lessons with a jazz teacher on the instrument. You literally just you learned how to do it like just I'm going into this situation. I don't know what to expect. That's how you learned.
I wish I had a recording because who knows what I played.
Did you know, like, did you just think to do like what I'm sure you thought the basic just swing groove was like ding, ding, to ding, or you just like, were
I
you
don't know.
playing more rock stuff? Like, how did that work?
I don't know. It's 1987, I think that is. So, I don't. Like I said, I wish I had a recording. Who knows what I played? But we all hear some jazz, consequently, in our lives, whether it's in a TV show or a soundtrack or something. You know what I mean? So obviously, you're not going to play a rock beat if your friends are playing Stella by Starlight, right? So, but beyond a basic, I don't really don't know what I played, but it was soon after that I recognized quickly that I would need to take lessons.
Hmm.
So,
Do you remember the first so after that gig, when did you actually start to feel comfortable like playing those types of gigs? Like how long did it take, you think?
I'm still waiting for that. uh, you know, I think I was really oblivious, blissfully ignorant and just and having the fact that these are friends of mine and I didn't have to worry about them firing me. There was plenty of better drummers in town they could have hired, but that wasn't really our mindset. We were friends doing these things together, and we would get together and rehearse tunes just for our own, like it wasn't like a cutthroat, freelancing type of mentality like we have to deal with when we're.
No, it sounds like it was just fun. Like you guys are friends and trying to do this together.
Yes,
But 4 nights a week, though.
yes.
Yeah, I mean that's a learning experience, and situations like that are hard to come by these days, if at all, I would say.
Sure, sure. Yeah. We were not making very much money, and the owner was stiffing us half the time. I mean, it was a whole mess. But what did we, in retrospect, we did the right thing by just, taking advantage of a chance to play. And like I said, so a drummer came in one night. My friend Brian's like, "Oh, this great drummer John Carlton's going to come by, and it's so cool if he sits in." I'm like, "Yeah, of course." So he comes in. We're on a break, and we're sitting next to the stage, which is carpeted, and he pulls out his sticks. He does a double stroke roll to warm up. His hands on the side of the stage. I didn't even know what a double stroke roll was at this point. I'm like, "Whoa, what is that?" Like, can I take lessons? And so I got my first, lessons in the. Like I said, started school band, but only stuck with it for a few years, so I only learned some very basic things. So John is the one that I took my first jazz lessons from. Showed me things like the Jim Chapin book, how to play a bossa nova, very basic things that I had no real idea of yet.
Yeah, and you're someone who works quite a bit with so many different people. I've called you many times to play some gigs and stuff. I'm just curious, what do you think it is about your playing that the phone keeps ringing where people are like, "Oh, I'm going to call Noel for this gig," or what do you hope to bring to the music that those opportunities will just keep arising?
Those are pretty two different things. Like, why do I think people call me, and what do I hope to bring? Like,
Well, let's start with the first one.
okay, so why do people call me? I mean, I try to show up on time. I try to, play appropriately for the gig. I think uh, I hope I'm perceived as somebody that doesn't come in with an ego and an agenda, and that I'm there to make the gig as best musically and as much fun as possible for the musicians and for the audience, and that's our collective goal. So hopefully, people call me because that's mentality of we're doing this together. Whether I succeed or fail, or whether I sound great or not, I mean, I'm here to hopefully bring what it is you want to make your gig the best it can be.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm also kind of curious too, from your perspective behind the drum set, what makes the gig for you good? But what takes it to that place where, the music was at such a high level, being in the moment, you can't go to sleep, so to speak. What is it about those particular instances that happen?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint sometimes. Sometimes it's just the group clicks, and from the moment you start playing, everything just seems to be in that place where we're all on the same page, and you have those, the tune's over, and you realize, man, we just had this nice, you know what I mean? And then there's gigs where things might distract you between the start and end of a tune, right? And that if that's once that starts happening more, it's hard to rebound and get back on the trajectory where you're not having to think about stuff too much. It's just happening naturally. So
You're in the flow
so
state, so to
right,
speak.
and that could be because of the we play in so many different venues. So part of that could be nothing to do with us. It could be something how the energy of the audience or the staff or the acoustics of the room sometimes are challenging. Um, but I feel like most of the time, no matter what the circumstances, if the musicians just are there to play, and once we start playing, we're just all on the same page, then the time just goes by, and before you know it, oh,
No,
here we are.
that's the best part when you're like, whoa, like the set's over. Like that's just
Yep,
sometimes that happens. That's just what's going on.
yep,
You know,
yep.
Who would you, right now, who would you like to work with? Given the opportunity, anyone who's played you haven't gotten a chance to work with, or even so, like let's say you could go back to the 1960s or something and work with somebody. Who would you have liked to work with?
I mean, who wouldn't you want to work with if you're giving me that kind of time frame? There's like we all know there's just such an endless amount of amazing musicians in music.
Well, for me, I would have loved to play with Elvin Jones. That would have been,
Sure.
probably at the top of my lists. And we were talking before, you know, Zoom died on us. About I think the way my perspective, on someone like yourself is that there's so many of these different drummers like Max Roach or Elvin or something that come into your playing. Was there one drummer that you studied particularly, a lot off of records, or did you kind of like try to spread it out and learn a little from everybody, or was there like one focus? How does that work?
No, not one, but certainly I'd say I've spent a good deal time with Max and Kenny Clark and Art Blakey, and Billy Higgins is one of my personal favorites. And when I got back to the area, that's who I would go see them play the most.
Have you ever heard that record of his with John Schofield and well, it's Schofield's records, Schofield, Brad Meldau, and Christian McBride and Billy Higgins and Kenny
No,
Garrett?
no, I haven't.
Oh man, that's where I first heard Billy Higgins. It was just, he was, he was a master, truly.
Truly, truly. And to experience some of these people, to experience them in the room live, um, is is a whole nother level of experience. Unfortunately, because we can all hear on records the astounding geniuses that we've never gotten to see in person, and our lives are changed. And these guys, but so then you see how when you're in the room with them, how much even heavier it is. That's the fact that we haven't gotten to be in the room with so many people is we can only imagine what it might have been like to being around when so much stuff was happening. But having been in the room, I would say like Elvin, Idris Muhammad, Billy Higgins, those guys brought another level of vibe, or like they really, the room would be in such a state when they were
Yeah,
playing.
I've had some moments where I've indulged and then put on headphones and listen to Coltrane and just try to imagine it?
So can you imagine what it was like to be there?
No.
So yeah, I remember one gentleman. I ended up I would go to the Vanguard. Like every year, Cedar Walt would have a couple weeks around Christmas time with the trio plus Jackie Williams, Jackie McLean for a week, and Vincent Herring for the second week. So I would go, especially try to catch the week with Jackie. And at that point, I'd already gotten to know Billy Higgins a little bit. I'd gotten a lesson from him, so I felt a little boldened to sit in that, the part of the bench behind the drums, kind of,
On the banquette, yeah.
and get to be right there. And one night met this guy. I had great conversation. He had seen Coltrane live, and he described it as like sitting underneath Niagara Falls.
That's I mean, even on some of these recordings that people haven't like they're screaming in the background. Like
And there's recordings when there's almost nobody there.
that's true. That's true. Let's talk a little bit, you mentioned the Village Vanguard and you've gotten a chance to work in some great venues. You've got a chance to work in venues that some musicians, they dream about being on that stage. And I also know you've led the jam session, been at the jam, at the Brightside Tavern in Jersey City for a long time. Are there any venues out there for you that you feel have like an undeserved reputation, good or bad? There are places that should be getting more recognition that aren't. How do you feel about that?
That's interesting. In terms of recognition, I don't. It's so hard to judge because we are such a microscopic part of the overall, focal points of the world. You know what I mean? Like what percentage? So if the Village Vanguard is accepted universally as like the legendary longest running club. I don't know if it's the longest running, but out of all the major clubs, probably the longest running, right? But
Hmm.
what you step outside the jazz circle and what level of recognition is that? Zero, right? So, but the Blue Note might have a name that extends beyond the jazz community because it being a multinational corporate entity with advertising or whatever. So whether that's overrated, I don't know. If the Blue Note is recognized more than the Vanguard, well, there's a lot of Blue Notes. I mean, maybe I should pick one Blue Note to make a fair comparison. But if say the New York Blue Note versus the Village Vanguard, maybe the New York Blue Note's more famous, right? But I mean, I don't know if it's
That's interesting you say that because it's almost like, oh yeah, there's a lot of Gordon Ramsay, restaurants or something, but then there's also only one, that famous restaurant in New York City by that chef Eric Ripero, and I forget the name of it, but yeah, it's like you say, there's a lot of Blue Notes and only one Vanguard.
yeah, and even if I just narrow it down to the one Blue Note, but I don't know if that's a important discussion, like whether a club is overrated or. But you did say like what club deserves more
Yes,
recognition?
yes,
Sure. I mean
sure.
that it'd be great if all clubs got. It's like you could be the most overrated, most recognized, well-known person in jazz, and you're still underrated in terms of the greater scope of things because of the small slice of the pie that we exist in. So you take like who's the most famous? Take a Herbie Hancock. Is he overrated? How could Herbie Hancock be overrated? He could be right in the general world speaking. He's vastly underrated. So it's just so relative.
No, no, just based on the universe, it's people probably know the name Herbie Hancock because they said that name in the movie Tommy Boy with Chris Farley versus actually knowing about his music. Because when I say, do you know Herbie, they might even mention that.
Or say the next step might be they may know Rocket, but they don't know him playing with Miles or his records, or they may know Headhunters, but still, there's no way Herbie Hancock could be overrated.
And I also wanted to ask you too, because um, you know, this music for many people, there's such an emotional release when they play every time. It could be therapeutic. For some people, it's spiritual, transcendental, or some people it's just they're just they don't even think about it in those terms. So what does the music mean to you?
I guess the what does it mean to me? That's a big question. Uh, I think music is a part of culture. It's a part of how people in a culture express themselves non-verbally, I guess, if we're talking about instrumental, if we're talking about, but not that music doesn't have lyrics, but so there's that component too. But even when there's no lyrics, it's how a culture expresses itself. So, what does it mean for me? I guess it's a way for me to, I guess, participate in and communicate my feelings about our culture, who we are. And we all, there seems to be a human need for expression, right? And to be part of conversation. And there's a part of us that, if we're in the right state, can be receptive to somebody else's communication. So, if you're listening to, having those experiences, listening to Coltrane, in that moment, you were receptive to it, right? So how acclimated we are to that expression is going to determine how much we can get from it. We can't expect most people to who have never heard anything remotely like that to just drop the needle in the middle of, you know, live at the half note, and I don't know what they would get from that. Like for me personally, it took time to get any kind of grasp on what I was hearing, much less have a meaningful experience. But I sensed something there and some connection that drew me in. But yeah, I really feel it's I think one of the reasons it's not so popular is because it does ask more of the listener,
Sure. And
and
these days,
you have to.
oh,
What's
sorry, what
that?
were you saying?
Oh, you have to want to delve into it. That has to be something that gives you the impetus to want to get into something that's not so easily grasped.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's something, you know, even artists struggle, even talking about music and having these conversations. So I think it's definitely something to, you're making very valid points. And when it comes to jazz, it is sort of a niche genre sometimes, and that's another thing I wanted to ask you too, because you mentioned that before you got into jazz, you were playing rock and roll and stuff. Um, what were your earliest influences in terms of bands or drummers, like non-jazz? What comes to your mind?
The first album that I sat there and tried to copy on the drums was the band Boston, their first record. I think the first side of their first record was the first record I sat there and tried to play along with as best as I could hear what was going on and copy and try to, you know, have that. To me, what seemed fun will be able to, play along with the record as if I'm playing with the band. Like that was my talk about goals. That was my goal. Play along with a recording as if I know the whole tune.
Yeah,
And
that's something I try to convey to my students now. Like they want to learn something. I'm like, if you want to learn this song, like I don't care if it's Metallica or, you have to be able to play it along with the record. Otherwise, I don't
and
really see the point.
and it doesn't matter which song you choose because every song's going to have a bunch of vocabulary that's going to be relevant to thousands of other songs. So it really just pick what you like and try to copy it and you're going to learn all kinds of stuff.
No, totally. So it was Boston that those were the first records that you tried to play. Anyone else?
Oh yeah, from there, I got more into classic rock. Zeppelin was definitely my, John Bonham. So once I got in a few years of playing, that became a kind of, I guess, a focal point. Also Hendrix, a lot of these are records my sister had. I have a sister that's a year and a half older. So like before I got a stereo, I'd sit in her room and listen to her records. And I remember already I didn't have drums yet, but I'd be trying to hear what the drums were doing in my head. So and she had a lot of classic rock stuff. So, um, but definitely Zeppelin. If I had to pick one, it would be John Bonham.
Yeah. Song remains the same. Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, I don't think that was a great. Uh, yeah, I mean that. I don't think that was them at their best, to be
You
honest.
said that's interesting you say that because that when I listened to that record, that was the first time I ever got chills listening to music.
Well, cool,
Yeah.
because it's still Led Zeppelin. I'm just saying, relative. I've heard other like live bootlegs that blew that away.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah,
No, that
especially when they were younger. I think the years, and by that time, the years were starting to take its toll on them physically because of they weren't taking good care of themselves, right? So I feel like there's again my sister has some really cool bootlegs from Europe.
Oh yeah, I gotta
That
find out
were
about these bootlegs.
oh man, those were really pretty killing.
Yeah, and also, I think me personally, I think life is hard in general. Being an artist is hard too. Trying to make a living being an artist is even harder. We have to draw inspiration from other places aside from, from music. So where do you think you draw the most inspiration to keep playing from, that's non-music related?
I don't from non-music. I mean, just other than just life, personal relationships, or you know, this is not a direct answer, but one thing that helped me a lot in terms of being able to sustain a life in music is, you know, I don't need a lot to survive compared to a lot of people.
Hmm.
I had a mentor when I was a kid named Kevin Dye who, put me on to some of his outdoor education programs that he started, and I was very fortunate, in that my summer job in high school was being like a junior counselor or whatever for these amazing outdoor, so if it wasn't for music, like that was more of a primary direction in my life was outdoor activities, backpacking, rock climbing, things like that. And so I got exposed to a lot of, I guess, non-traditional American, more East, Kev was very into Native American philosophies and Eastern philosophies and environmentalism. And, you know, I got exposed to things at a really young age that helped me not necessarily desire the same markers of what is success or what is necessary to live on. Those he's a big reason why I may not have some of those needs that a lot of people
Yeah,
have.
and it's interesting. Like we all have these different needs and everything, and I've always felt like my most important need when it came to the music was just to understand what's going on, uh, plain and simple.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, and to like gauge something, a percentage of something that the masters like could have done. You know what I mean? But I think just the understanding of it is something that gets overlooked because we all want to achieve different things. But no, this is great. Before we wrap up, the one other thing I wanted to ask you was, learning jazz. Like you're saying you learned jazz by going to this gig and just having to do it in real time. I was fortunate enough to go to some, really great music programs, but the fact of the matter is, I feel like I learned jazz off the records and from just doing it, like just putting myself in situations to fail, and just to keep going. Uh, so I kind of think jazz education has it backwards in some ways. So, what do you feel like to an aspiring young jazz drummer who is just getting started? What would you want to convey to them?
I'm glad you asked because I was thinking while you were talking, I wanted to circle back around to something you said, and your question leads me right to that. Is like we're it's like a lifelong journey to try to understand what's going on, right? So I'm thinking of like things that are, deciphering the message, things like people like Hank Mobley and Art Blakey would name tunes, things like that. And it's like,
Yeah,
what is the message? So on one level, it's, what are these notes? What are these chords? What are these rhythms? But something I was talking about earlier was the not just what, but why. The cultural background, the music as being an expression of a culture. So you may understand, if you're going to a school, you may learn to understand the notes, but it's an academic environment. It's not where the music is from culturally. So it's not, you can't expect a school to provide you with that. So I think the people that have uh, wanted to understand that badly enough become drawn to the point where their lives start becoming part of the culture,
hmm,
right? So how much understanding are you going to have of the music culturally and where it comes from, and what the message is, or what's beyond the notes, if you don't have a much experience with the culture that it's from. Not that
yeah,
we cannot listen to indie music, classical indie music, and be just as entranced and immersed and inspired and all those things. But if we also know the culture that it's from and the religious expression that it represents and those things, I'm sure that if we had the chance to move to India and immerse ourselves in that culture, then our understanding would go that much deeper of that music.
No, that's that. Yeah, you talk about culture, and I mean, culture even goes beyond transcription and study, and it's like it's in its own realm when it comes to understanding it.
That's right. So culture is people interacting with people. So
Yeah.
we can learn about culture through reading books and studying, but you're never going to really understand it the same way as if culture is the sum total of the interactions of people. How much are you going to understand if you're not interacting with people?
No, no, this is great. Noel, thank you so much
Yeah,
for doing this. I hope we'll get a chance to do it again because, I think you made some really valid points that you know, some stuff for me to think about too. So I really appreciate it.
appreciate you asking me to do it.
Yeah.
We running out of time here.
We're running out. Well, we're gonna click stop record, then we'll say a proper goodbye.
All right, cool. Thanks.